In the last video, we ended by noting that social traps are one cause of environmental issues. Your book discusses 3 types of social traps: the tragedy of the commons, time delay, and sliding reinforcer. We're going to spend some time here discussing the tragedy of the commons. Review the discussion of the tragedy of the commons on pages 13 and 14 of your textbook. The Tragedy of Commons was written by UC Santa Barbara professor Garrett Hardin and was published in the journal Science in 1968. Science is the premier peer-reviewed scientific journal in the United States, and thus the article was widely read by the scientific community. Despite 40 years passing, it is still considered a classic paper in environmental literature. If you continue studying environmental science, you will likely encounter this paper again. If you are interested, I encourage you to read the entire article. It's not long, and it can be found on the Garrett Hardin Society website. One of the main points of Hardin's paper that is generally mentioned in environmental science textbooks is that our ability to solve many environmental problems is related to the struggle between short-term individual welfare and long-term environmental sustainability and societal welfare. The problem being that individuals act in their own short-term self-interest at the expense of what is best for society, and ironically, in the long term, even the individual will suffer. If you think about it, generally actions that lead to environmental sustainability are also best for society because we depend entirely on our natural resources in order to survive. How is it then that we make decisions that are not in our society's best interests? In his paper, Hardin recounts a parable of the sheep grazing commons in medieval Europe. Your book briefly summarizes the story on page 13. Let's look more closely at the parable in terms of the conflict between short-term individual welfare and long-term societal and environmental welfare. In the case of sheep grazing, each individual can gain the benefit of one entire additional sheep for every sheep he or she adds to the field. As the grazing land deteriorates due to overgrazing, each individual sees a loss, but the losses are shared with everyone. Thus the profits are private and the losses are shared. So it seems like a good idea to keep adding sheep. Keep this up, and eventually the grazing land is destroyed. For those of you who have studied economics, this parable seems to denounce the idea of laissez-faire economic philosophy and the idea attributed to Adam Smith that the invisible hand of the market, i.e. the market's self-regulating capacity, is capable of allocating resources in a society. Indeed, self-interested individuals generally do not promote the public good. And in this case, freedom to use these resources brings ruin, resource depletion, to the commons. As we continue to think about the parable, perhaps some of the sheep farmers would be able to see that their actions would eventually lead to destruction of the land. However, it's easy to imagine them thinking, if I don't use it, someone else will use it. Perhaps even those who are telling me not to use it. Now let's back off from the sheep parable and look at the tragedy of the commons in general as it relates to resource depletion. In general, a commons can be defined as something owned by nobody or jointly owned by a large community. Generally, it is a resource that is available free to all users. What resources today would you consider to be commons? Pause here to come up with a couple of examples of commons in today's world. What did you come up with? Here's a few ideas offered by students in the past. Fresh air, fresh water, oceans, ocean fisheries, forests, wildlife, national parks, soil, quiet, grazing lands, and darkness. Notably, in each case, the resource is free or owned by all. However, it is prone to deterioration or depletion if it's overutilized. Similarly, we can talk about the tragedy of the commons as it relates to pollution. Hardin also discusses this in his paper. Now, instead of talking about not taking too much from the commons, we'll consider putting too much pollution into the commons. We all pollute in many ways, including, but not limited to, sewage from our toilets and sinks, exhaust from our cars, exhaust from our furnaces or fireplaces, runoff from our lawns, noise or light into the quiet and dark night, etc. Also, don't forget all the pollution done in your name to create and transport all the products you use every day. As we drive our cars a few blocks or a few miles to school or to the store, we likely think, the little bit of pollution I create is not enough to matter. But now consider the cumulative effect of everyone's little bits. We all enjoy the entire benefit that we gain as we pollute, modern technologies, quick transit, etc. But we share the cost of pollution with everyone else. Thus, to us, it might seem cheaper to pollute than to do whatever action that might be needed to prevent or control the pollution. Hence, the tragedy. All right, we understand the tragedy. So now what are the solutions to the tragedy of the commons? Well, first, as your book points out, education is important. But unfortunately, education is likely not to be the total solution. You can probably think of many resource depletion and pollution issues current day where education is just not quite enough. Another common idea for a solution is privatization of the commons. The idea that if the commons is owned, it is in the owner's best interest to manage it well. This idea that private owners are better and more efficient managers is pervasive in today's society. There is momentum to privatize drinking water, energy sources, forests, public lands, including our national parks, etc. A huge flaw with this thinking is the fact that owners, individuals or corporations, don't have any need to look to the long term. They can extract the resources and move on, often leaving the local neighbors to deal with the pollution and other problems left in their wake. Government management is another possible solution. The local, state, or national governing body makes regulations regarding the use of the resource to promote sustainability. You are all probably familiar with this idea. Consider grazing permits, firewood collection permits, mining permits, fishing and hunting licenses, and limits. In a wilderness area, there are often limits to the number of people allowed to camp or hike at a time. Also, related to government management is the idea of user fees, or pollution fines, if we are talking about pollution. We pay to get into our state and national parks, which are a common. The fees help us manage the park, and perhaps they also remind us of our responsibility to the commons. However, there are issues with charging a fee to use the commons. How might this be discriminatory? What other solutions can you think of? It's likely that many of the solutions will involve laws. Yikes, you're taking away my freedom. Yes, indeed, that is what laws do. That new park bench is indeed public property, paid for by your taxes. But that doesn't mean you can go paint it, smash it, or take it. Laws limit personal freedom for the greater benefit of society. According to Hardin, every new enclosure of the commons involves infringement of somebody's personal liberty. This is true and necessary for the public good. Hardin talks about mutual coercion that is mutually agreed upon. Societies agree on laws that will limit personal actions but promote sustainability and thus the public good. Sometimes we all need a little help to encourage us to do the responsible action. For example, taxes to fund our schools, police, fire, roads, etc. are agreed upon coercive devices for the public good. We all benefit. One of my favorite quotes from Hardin's article is, "An alternative to the commons need not be perfect to be preferable." Laws are not perfect, nor often enjoyable, but they are generally better than the alternative. Lastly, and notably, one of the central themes of Hardin's original article is not usually mentioned in textbooks. In fact, if you read the article, you'll see that the missing idea is perhaps his main point. So what is this mysterious idea that rarely makes it into introductory environmental science textbooks? Hardin was addressing human population growth. You may remember from our discussion of the causes of environmental issues that we have nearly doubled the number of people on Earth since the mid-1960s. Hardin's article was published in 1969, just when academia and the public were beginning to recognize the crisis of human population growth and the effects it was likely to have on the global environment in terms of resource depletion and pollution. In his article, Hardin notes, "The most important aspect of necessity that we must now recognize is the necessity of abandoning the commons in breeding." In fact, he stated that freedom to breed is intolerable. Hardin was recognizing that in order to retain the other freedoms that we associate with our quality of life, we need to set limits on human population growth. Indeed, he was recognizing that resource depletion and pollution are consequences of population growth. As you can imagine, the idea of limiting population growth was very controversial. Yikes! How can we make laws regarding how many children a family can have? Hardin's article was controversial and made quite a splash. A focus on reducing population growth dominated the environmental discussion. Notably, it also allowed folks to focus more attention on the developing world, the global south, where fertility rates were higher, rather than focusing on the more developed world, the global north, that was actually causing most of the resource depletion and pollution. In the last 10 or 15 years or so, activists from the global south have re-educated us a bit. In general, compared to the less developed nations, the richer, more developed nations have created most of the resource depletion and pollution burden. And due to their wealth, they have a lot more choices and opportunities to change their course. If you read the original article, you will find that Hardin starts with some mathematical talk. He notes that mathematically, it is impossible to maximize two variables at the same time. Looking at human population, then, it is impossible to maximize both the number of people living on the planet and their standard of living. Hardin notes that to couple the concept of the freedom to breed with the belief that everyone born has an equal right to the commons is to lock the world into a tragic course of action. Hardin also states that there's no technical solution to this problem. Thus, we need a management solution. Do we want to limit the number of people or limit the number of calories everyone can consume? To what standard of living should we aspire? Later in the semester, you will be assigned an ecological footprint assignment, where you'll see that if everyone lived like a typical American, we would need several more planets. Yikes. Is it ethical for us to live like we do? What should we do? Notably, as the saying goes, we can never do nothing. Doing nothing is a decision in itself, a decision not to act.